Good morning. I'm Josh, and this is Emily. Like he said, we're here from Kentucky. We're not professional speakers. We're not preachers. We've just been asked to share our testimony with all of you and let you know how the Lord has touched us. I was raised in a Christian home with two younger brothers. We were very involved, might even say raised at Severance Valley Baptist Church. Severance Valley has a strong history, and even before Kentucky was a state, Severance Valley Settlement was the name of our town, which later became E-Town. As kids growing up, we were at church at least 4 days a week. My mom was a part of the recreation ministry teaching aerobics, and as kids, we were at almost every event the church had. As we became older, we participated in the Living Christmas Tree program. That's a program that reached out to our community, teaching about the birth, the life, and the death of Jesus. I was around the age of 9 or 10 years old when I accepted Jesus into my life.
And I come from a rather large family. I grew up Catholic, if that tells you anything. I am the oldest of 6 children, 5 of us are girls, and the youngest is a boy. My parents are still married and still live in the home that I grew up in. All of my siblings live within 30 minutes of one another. We are an extremely close-knit family. I grew up in the very small town of Rineyville, Kentucky. It's one of those everyone knows everyone kind of towns, and I'm related to almost everyone. I grew up in a small Catholic church, St. John, with about 80 to 90 families. I went to Catholic school from the time I was in kindergarten until I started 6th grade middle school. I grew up in the church my whole life. Josh and I started dating in October of 2003. My dad, who's a general contractor, was working on the remodel of a business next to Josh's work. I was attending college at Western Kentucky University. And on the weekends that I would come home, I would meet up with my dad and I'd work with him small jobs. While spackling nail holes, I happened to catch a glimpse of Josh next door. He finally made his way over to talk to my dad later on in the day. And as he came over to talk to my dad, I was on some scaffolding painting, and the only words Josh spoke to me were, "Do you need a push?" No other words were exchanged that whole weekend. I briefly told my dad that night at dinner that I thought Josh was cute, and that was the end of that, or so I thought. Over the next several weeks, I would make excuses to stop in to see if my dad was working at that same job site, knowing good and well he wasn't there. I was really just finding an excuse to stop in and see Josh, even if it was just for a quick minute and a "hi, no, haven't seen your dad" conversation. Before long, my dad casually mentioned to me that Josh may be calling. He had given Josh my phone number. That was the end of August, and someone didn't call until October.
Although Emily and I were born in the same town, graduated from the same high school, and had many of the same friends, her and I had never met until that smooth "Do you need a push" pickup line.
Other than those few quick talks at his work, I had never seen or spoken to Josh again. So when he called and asked for a date, it almost felt like a blind date. That was October 4th, 2003, was our first date. I can tell you everything about that night, from what we both wore, to where we went for dinner, and what horrible movie we saw. We've been together ever since. Our dating moved fast. I moved from college, which was about an hour and 15 minutes from home, back home in that December. And on March 26, 2004, just 5 months into dating, Josh popped the question. The following April, on the 16th, we were married. I was 22 and Josh was 25. We had known one another for a total of a year and a half. We were young, we were in love, and we were ready for anything that life would throw at us. Just shy of our 2-year wedding anniversary, we welcomed a baby girl. Adel and Dale made us parents for the first time on February 12, 2007. We added a son, Reed William, on September 25, 2010. We are learning all there is about parenting a 12-year-old girl, which is a lot, an 8-year-old boy. It's a lot of fun, a lot of trial and error, a lot of learning, and a lot of time spent on the golf course and the baseball field.
Coming from two different religious backgrounds, Catholic and Southern Baptist, we didn't see our backgrounds as an obstacle for marriage. Our views were not based solely on how you worship, but that we were both believed in God and that we were both Christians. After marriage, our religious backgrounds did have an effect on our marriage. We attended Severns Valley on some Sundays, and we attended St. John on other Sundays. And that became exhausting. One would rather go to their church while the other would go to theirs. We had family and friends at both churches, but I don't feel like we ever felt like we had a home as a couple. This proved even more challenging once our kids started getting older. We each had our own opinions about certain holidays, sacraments, and church attendance. And about 7 years ago, we decided to seek out churches in our area. We were looking for a home with no family influence, no set denomination, just a church we could attend as a family, worship together, and eventually make it our home church. Over several weeks in a few different churches, we found a church that fit us perfectly, Grace Heartland Church. We quickly made some friends and became involved. Grace Heartland Church became our home. We now teach Sunday school to second graders. We're involved in the annual Easter egg hunt, the record-breaking trunk or treat, and have done mission work around the community, and Emily's been involved in MOPS. We belong to a wonderful small group that meets on Sundays and have developed some really close friends. Grace Heartland has become so much more to us than just a place to go on Sunday mornings.
On the outside looking in, we were active at our church and had quite a few friends and acquaintances. It wasn't until we were asked to speak during the Sunday morning service back in August that we really became vulnerable and let our church family in on our personal struggles.
The end of March, I started to develop some lower back pain. I thought I had tweaked a muscle during a workout. But the pain continued, and with Dr. Google, I decided that the pain was a kidney infection. A visit to the doctor and an antibiotic later, and the pain was working. Tylenol was not taking the edge off, and I began taking hydrocodone just to function throughout the day and sleep at night. The 1st of April, we had an adult-only trip planned with some of our closest friends, and during that trip, the pain changed from a dull pain to a sharp pain. Standing on the beach, I called the doctor's office. We discussed the possibility of kidney stones, and we scheduled a CT scan. When we returned, the CT scan was performed and showed an enlarged lymph nodes and a mass on my spleen. We then scheduled a biopsy. Monday, April 30th, Emily and I were returning to work after lunch, and we received a call from the doctor's office. They had the biopsy results. Instead of giving us the results over the phone, they wanted us to come in and talk in person. We were 5 minutes from their office, and we just drove straight there in complete silence. We walked up to the doctor's window. They didn't ask who we were or why we were there. They just took us straight back to a room. The doctor came in. She had already emotionally prepared herself, but still had a hard time delivering the news. You have lymphoma. And April 30th was the beginning of our journey.
Cancer has unfortunately never been a strange word in my family, but sitting next to your husband and hearing those words will forever be ingrained in my mind. Shock, fear, and uncertainty hung in the air. And as the doctor handed me tissues and was very sympathetic, I just kept repeating in my head, I can't go through life without him. And because cancer isn't a stranger to my family, I knew without a doubt that my faith would be the forefront of our fight.
But Jesus doesn't call you on your cell phone or send you a text with emojis. The answers and guidance he gives to our prayers, they may be subtle. They may come years later. They may not be answered in the way we want them answered. But the day I was diagnosed, Jesus answered in a very bold and definitive way. Emily and I had returned to work after the meeting with the doctor. We were wrapping our heads around the situation, making doctor's appointments, PET scans appointments, and trying to figure out our medical path over the next several days. We were not focused on work at all, and in walks an older man. Our complete staff was on hand, but no one was around to help this man. I reluctantly got up from my desk and asked the man if there was anything I could do to help. The entire time as the man's approaching, I'm judging this man based on the clothes he is wearing. He had worn out old tennis shoes, worn out blue jeans. He was wearing a very old, stretched out neck, long sleeve red shirt. His hair was well past due for a haircut, and it was a week past needing to shave. The man was looking for flaxseed oil. He needed to refinish some old furniture. I quickly answered, "We don't have any, and I have no idea if you'll find any in E-Town." I was wanting to quickly send this man on his way so I could return to what I felt was more important. He graciously thanked me and said he had been to several stores and we were his last hope in finding it. I paused and pushed aside my unwillingness to help and offered to see if any of my vendors had flaxseed oil. At this point, the man sat on the bench next to me as I was scrolling through my vendors' websites. I found linseed oil, lemon oil, tung oil, and a variety of other oil finishes that old school woodworkers would use, but no flaxseed oil. As I continued to search, the man continued to talk, and I could honestly say I have no idea what he was saying until he said, "I was diagnosed with cancer when I was in prison." At that point, his words pierced my ears and he had my full attention. He continued with his story. "I was an engineer. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, made some bad decisions, and ended up in prison. 6 months before I was released, I was diagnosed with cancer. I received very little care from the prison system, but once I was released, I met with an oncologist to discuss my situation. The oncologist told the man to get his affairs in order and gave him 6 months to live. At this point, that man had my full undivided attention. Why on this day did he feel the need to tell me this story? He didn't know the news I had received just hours before, but he continued with his story. And he looked at me and said, "I told that doctor that me and my Lord have this." He said, "The treatments were hard and left me weak, but my wife gained her angel wings as she nursed me back to health." I was at a complete loss for words. I was even fighting back tears. This man had just been an answer to a prayer that I hadn't even prayed yet. I have told this story several times, and each time I am more convinced that this is the closest thing to a true one-on-one conversation I will ever have with Jesus. This man was a woodworker. He was persecuted and jailed, and he overcame with his faith. And yes, I found him flaxseed oil.
When Josh got home and first told me about the conversation with the older gentleman, I wasn't sure if he hadn't imagined him. The more I think about it, the more I believe that God sent him as an angel. Just a short couple of hours after receiving such shocking news, we didn't know what we needed, but God did. We needed reassurance and to be reminded that God is in control. And he did just that with the gentleman walking through those doors of work. A man whose name we still have no idea, and we have yet to meet him again. Angels walk among us, and I truly believe that's what he was. When we got back to work that afternoon, I saw Josh's dad's devotional sitting open on his desk. The top of the page caught my attention as it read, "He will not fear bad news. His heart is confident, trusting in the Lord." Psalm 112, verse 7 and 8. To me, it was God's way of speaking to me and saying, "I'm here and I've got you." Just a little while into our journey, I took some notes during church that spoke to me. Jeff, our preacher, had said, "Faith is the ability to have confidence in things you cannot see." And I believe that's 100% true. And to stay faithful, keep your eyes on Jesus. This too applies to our story. We've had to keep our confidence and our faith and we most definitely have had to keep our eyes on Jesus. The day we got our news forever changed us. After we had somewhat come to terms with what we had been told, and then we had the heartbreaking talk with our kids. We held them in our arms, and we cried, and we prayed, and we shared the verse from Psalms with them. We then left to tell our families. After we had told my parents and a couple of my sisters who had come by, I had one sister that just said, "I don't know what to do, but can we just pray?" So around the dining room table, we held hands and we prayed. We then went to each of Josh's brothers' homes, and before we left, they too asked, "Can we just pray with you?" And as we were sitting at his brother Jake's house, Mandy, our sister-in-law, asked if she could share her verse of the week with us. I said, "Sure, but would you mind if I shared a verse with you that spoke to us earlier in the day?" So I read them the verse from Psalms and how I had just come across it hours before. After I'd finished reading it, I looked up and both of them had their mouths wide open. And that's when Mandy said, "That's the exact verse I was going to share with you. That's my verse of the week." And I just wanted to look up and say, "I hear you, God. I feel you loud and clear." Day one, and we were already feeling the prayers and God's love.
Just a few days later, I opened the Bible app on my iPad. I had no plan, no verses in mind. I was just going to dive in and see where it took me. The home screen showed a devotional. Stay the course because God is faithful to his promises. And the first verse I read was James chapter 1, 2-4. "Consider it my pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that testing your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." The devotional followed up with the next reading from James chapter 2, 2-5. "Suppose a man comes into your meeting wearing a gold ring and fine clothes, and a poor man in filthy old clothes also comes in. If you show special attention to the man wearing fine clothes and say, 'Here's a good seat for you,' but say to the poor man, 'You stand there or you sit on the floor by my feet,' have you not discriminated among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Listen, my dear brothers and sisters, has not God chosen those who are poor in the eyes of the world to be rich in faith and to inherit the kingdom he has promised those who love him?" In that first verse, God comforted me. He said it was going to be all right, just to hang in there and let him finish his work. In that second verse, he humbled me, saying, "Remember that man that came in the store looking for flaxseed oil? You had judged him just by the clothes he was wearing."
Like I said, I come from a large family. I have a very large circle of friends, but letting people in on my heart and my personal life isn't easy. But I have a very small, close-knit circle of friends and family that I let in on those hurts and those fears and those struggles. Now, even months after our journey started, talking about these hurts and fears and struggles is difficult. And being here with you guys today, God is pushing us outside our comfort zones. And that small, close-knit circle of friends and family are cheering for us and praying for us even while we are 900 miles from home. But I've been so humbled through this entire journey. I don't like to ask for help. I don't like to feel vulnerable, but our diagnosis of cancer did not care about that. God said to let people in and they will help you, and I pushed back. I didn't want to think or admit that we had to have help, but our friends and family were not going to give up, and they came through, and every day they continue to come through. Every day when I think of the overwhelming power of friendship and prayer and outreach that we've received brings tears to my eyes. We've learned that people just want to help. They've fed us, they've mowed our yard, they've asked if they could keep our kids, they've cleaned our house, they've sent cards, they've called, they've texted, and they have prayed relentlessly. In years to come, when I think back on this journey we are going through, the willingness to help, the want to help, and the support and love of our friends and family is what I will look back on. We were given a small gift basket from our small group the day before our first chemo treatment, and in it was a shirt with a lymphoma ribbon on it, and it said, "Stronger than you think." And I kind of found it funny because that was the last thing I felt. But we were lifted up during those first few weeks by friends and faith and prayers, and that's where we got our strength, and it turned out that we were stronger than we thought. The day we received our diagnosis, I was mindlessly scrolling through Facebook. I was in a daze and I was in shock. But I came across something that caught my attention. It was a shirt that said faith, the greater than sign, and then fear. But I thought to myself, no, I'm going to have to put my faith over my fear. And it kind of gave me a calming feeling, like I knew then that God had us. He was going to see us through this. We only had to trust him. So that's where our motto, faith over fear, came from. And every day I knew that I would have to put my faith over my many fears. And every day brought new fears. It seemed that the day that we were diagnosed, everywhere I looked, I kept seeing those two words, faith and fear.
Faith over fear has so much more meaning than just a neat shirt. Every single one of us has suffered, are suffering, and will suffer in the future. However big or small the suffering may be, you have a decision to make. And the only solution is to put your fears into your faith. Lay it all out on Jesus and let him carry your fear. The fear has not left us, but it has not consumed us either.
And each day since then, numerous times every day, we feel the prayers and we feel God's unending love for our family. So have we suffered? Maybe. But we have learned so much. We've grown so much, and we have come out on top, and we have been victorious. Has our marriage struggled through it? No, the complete opposite. We are way stronger today than we were 293 days ago.
When you are suffering, when you're faced with problems, when you have struggles, surround yourself with friends, Christian friends and family. Emily and I met Pastor Jorge and Olivia for the first time at my parents' house. They were in town visiting and were socializing with my parents in my parents' basement. Emily and I had stopped by to talk to my parents privately about the news we had just received that day and the need for a biopsy to confirm what the enlarged lymph nodes in the mass on my spleen were. We were able to fellowship with them that night, and although Pastor left my parents' house, unaware of the struggles we were soon to be facing, but we did feel a sense of comfort. In the days that followed, my dad shared with Pastor the diagnosis, and we knew immediately we had a prayer warrior in our corner. We want to thank Pastor and Olivia and this entire church for the prayers that have surrounded us during this journey. I have often thought about God's plan and how he reveals his plan. My dad and my brother came to Texas to see where their help could be used after the flooding from the hurricane. Was God's plan for them to come down here and bring mission teams to help this area? Or was God's plan for us to come to know this church so Pastor and this whole church could be a blessing to our family? In all reality, God knows all things, and he knew the outcome of my dad and my brother's first trip to Texas.
2 weeks before we were diagnosed, Josh and I celebrated our 13th wedding anniversary. Was it the doomed, unlucky 13? Maybe not. Year 13 brought so many trials and struggles, but we also learned a lot, and we grew a lot. I stood before God and our family and friends and vowed to love Josh through sickness and health, through good times and bad. We've joked, we just didn't think that part of our marriage vows would be tested so quickly. I married my best friend, the person put on this earth for me, and I'm thankful that I get to do life with him every day.
I want to thank Emily. She's been my rock. She is my rock through everything. She made every single appointment, every treatment, and we beat this together. One of the pictures that we're scrolling up through there, it's kind of some of the pictures that we had through our journey, just of our family. That's our two kids, Adeline and Reed. I finished treatments in September, went to the doctor for a PET scan the end of August, followed up on a Friday with the doctor to get the all clear on that PET scan, and then the next day we left for Florida to enjoy a week on vacation. But some of those pictures as you scroll through there are just our family. There's some of the kids. The kids were involved in everything we went through. They were involved in the haircuts. The first haircut I got, the hair was coming out. So we just went ahead and shaved it all the way down. Both of the kids took turns. My daughter didn't like the bald head.
There's also some pictures of an older home. We had bought this house before we were diagnosed to renovate and to flip. And it took us a lot longer because of everything we went through. But that house kind of became therapy for us. Josh would finish treatments, and the next day, if he felt up to it but didn't feel like going to work, he would spend hours in this house just taking out frustrations, and I couldn't tell you how many hours and hours of conversations with God that we had in this house. It was a form of therapy for us. And then we sold it.
There's also some pictures on here of our friends that we were talking about, our small group from church. These friends have been with us. They've gone to Florida with us. We go to football games together. We're going to Gatlinburg here in the next month. So that was the trip to Florida where we talked about that we hadn't been diagnosed, but we were just days away, and those are a couple of our closest friends. And then that's Jared and Jesse, who are also a couple of our closest friends that have been through a lot with us. We've known them a long time.
And there's some more pictures where just randomly, and even now, we'll see people wearing our shirts, our Faith Over Fear shirts. And even after we have beat this, and it's still humbling to see people wearing these shirts out and supporting us and showing their love. That's almost my entire family in that picture there. That was after our daughter Adeline had been baptized this summer.
There's been pictures of my brothers and my mom and dad on there. It's just kind of neat just watching everything and looking back at the pictures.
We've been asked a lot how our kids handled all of this. Kids are resilient. They roll with it. We told our kids at the ages then of 11 and 7, they knew what we meant when we said Daddy has cancer. But they understood when we would say Daddy doesn't feel good today or Daddy's tired and Mom's going to do it today, whether it was the baseball field, the golf course. And I don't know, they may look back and remember the bad things, but I would hope to think that they remembered everyone that prayed for us, how positive our outlooks were, and that we came out on top.
I guess kind of one thing that we talked about the other night and I've talked about and reflected on, I never really asked why. I never asked God why this happened to me. It did. I didn't have any control of it. It happened. But the question I did ask, the question I prayed about is what could I do? What was his plan for me by having cancer? There had to be a reason. And I think he's unfolding that even now, just being here today, pushing us outside of our comfort zone, pushing us 900 miles away from home, and being able to share our stories with so many other people. We want to thank you all for letting us share with you today.